Hi guys, so today we will be starting with the discussion of a very important topic, which is immunology. It falls under the chapter Human Health and Diseases in the 12th syllabus. It's extremely important for NEET as well as for boards, right? So now throughout our lives we come across so many diseases, right? We sometimes fall sick, we get better. For example, we had COVID a few years back, 4 years back. What did the vaccine do? Why was it that some people succumbed to the disease while some, even after getting the disease, got better? Some of them got very mild symptoms while some had to get admitted into the hospital. What was the difference? The difference was immunity, right? So just like every country has its own set of defense that protects the country from foreign invaders, our body has a whole set of defense that protects us from foreign invaders or from outside invaders. Anything that is coming from the outside into our system, we call it an antigen. Now, antigens can be viruses, can be bacteria, can be any other microorganism, or it can be allergens. So what our body has is that it identifies things that belong to itself. They are called the self substances, and things which come from a foreign source. Like we have Aadhaar cards and voter IDs to prove that we are Indian citizens, while people coming from outside need to have a visa or a passport to show that they are a resident from some other country, so they are foreigners. Similarly, our body has a system of self and a non-self, right? So this whole concept took a very long time to really come up. One of the first scientists who worked on it was Leeuwenhoek, who visualized bacteria, and then we had somebody called Dr. Robert Koch. Dr. Robert Koch gave us a thing which is known as the Koch's postulate. The Koch's postulates say that it's a very simple postulate. It says that if a person is suffering from a disease, then the microorganism or the cause of the disease should be identifiable and recoverable from that person. So if I am suffering from, let's say, COVID, then samples of COVID should be available in my mucus, right? That sample that you collect, you should be able to grow it in a lab. Once you grow it in a lab, if you inoculate a healthy person with the same sample, he should get the same disease that I have. So if I have COVID, you take my mucus sample should have the virus in it. The virus, though for viruses is difficult to culture, so let's say if it's a bacterial disease, I have tuberculosis, right? So Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Now then the bacteria for tuberculosis should be available in my sputum, right? In the mucus the phlegm that I will give out. If you isolate that bacteria and grow it in a lab, take it and inoculate it or inject it in a healthy individual, they should also get the same symptoms or the same diseases I do. That is what Koch's postulate was. Many scientists started working on Koch's postulates, and one of the first people to have a breakthrough was Dr. Edward Jenner. What Dr. Edward Jenner noticed was that milkmaids in his region, so women who used to milk the cows, did not somehow get smallpox. And smallpox was a very virulent and lethal disease at one point in time. Now it is eradicated courtesy Edward Jenner's vaccine. So what he found was that he got curious as to why milkmaids are not very susceptible to smallpox. So he noticed that these cows, they have cowpox, which also has pustules just like it happens in smallpox, like boils on the skin. And they happen near the tits or the breasts of the cows. So when the women were milking the cows, eventually they got exposed to this cowpox virus. So maybe somehow they derived an immunity. So what he did was he exposed the cowpox virus to a very fragile boy, let it inoculate. After some time, he exposed the boy to the smallpox virus itself, and he saw that the boy did not get smallpox. So from this, he concluded that the cowpox virus somehow produced defense against the original human smallpox, and that is how he came up with the first vaccine for smallpox. And since then, he has been known as the father of immunology, right? So when you study immunology, you study immunity. Now, immunity is your body's ability to fight against various diseases, right? Now, some of it we are born with. Some of it we acquire during our lifetime. The more exposure we get, the more immune we become during our life. So the ones that we are born with are known as the innate, or something that we are born with. So this is your natural immunity. Whereas the ones that we acquire throughout our lifetime is acquired immunity. Now the difference between these two is that acquired immunity has self-recognition. It can identify between self and non-self. As I told you, everything that belongs to my body is self to me, everything to somebody else, anything else that is from outside of my body is non-self for me. But innate immunity has no such ability. It is a non-specific kind of immunity. It does not have any specific function, or it is not specified. So it's not that a certain sect will work only when viruses come in, or bacteria. No, anything that is an antigen will be acted upon by your innate immunity, right? So it's non-specific in nature. The most important thing that the innate immunity does for us is that it gives us barriers. That will be the first line of defense. These will stop things from entering the system, right? So you will not be able to internalize the antigen. Then if it is inside, then it's a different story. So it's like your border security force, right? It sits at the border and it protects your country from getting invaded in the first place. Once it's invaded, then the army, the navy, the raw, everything will come in. But now, as of now, the BSF is what is our innate immunity, or the barrier system. There are 4 major barriers that we have. The first one is the physical barrier. So physical barrier refers to 2 most important things. One is the skin. So the outermost layer, the stratum corneum. Right? It's the first barrier. It's water resistant, it's dust resistant. I mean, nothing can actually get through it unless and until there are holes, which is in the mouth, the nose, the eyes, the ears, and the genital and anal openings. Other than that, your whole system is protected by a suit kind of a thing, which is your skin, right? So that's your stratum corneum. The second thing that is extremely important in this are your mucus layers. So all the openings that I talked about, so your oral root, so the mouth, the trachea, the esophagus, right? Then your gastrointestinal region and your urinogenital region. These 3 regions are the most exposed, and therefore these 3 regions have mucus secreting cells, which basically what mucus does is that it is a jelly like, it's a viscous substance which traps the dust or traps the pathogen. Correct? Moving on to physiological barriers. Physiological barriers include secretions from the body. So let's say lacrimal secretions, tear, sebaceous secretions, sebum, right? Oil. Waxy secretions, cerumen, yeah, from different parts. Then your saliva, hydrochloric acid in the stomach. All of these are secretions, and these secretions do what? they are either antimicrobial in nature, or they are acidic in nature, or they simply trap the pathogen or the dust or the structure and thereby give you a physiological barrier. Okay. Moving on to cellular barrier. This is extremely important. First, we will discuss PMNLs, right? Polymorphonuclear leukocytes. They are also called neutrophils. They are the most abundant leukocytes in your system, and they have two kinds of sequestering in your body. One that is roaming and one that is fixed. So there are clusters of neutrophils, or there are neutrophils that are present in your blood flow, correct? Similarly, monocytes. Monocytes again, similarly they are cells which help protect you against infections, and they, when they mature and when they get into tissue space, they change into macrophages. Now these macrophages again are of two types, so they can be fixed or they can be wandering. The wandering ones are found obviously in your blood flow. The fixed ones, good examples would be ones in the lung. They are known as the PAMs, or the pulmonary alveolar macrophages. Okay. Similarly, you have multiple of these sequestered in different parts of your system which help you to fight against. So for example, Kupffer cells in the liver, histiocytes in the in your connective tissue, right? Osteoclasts in your bones. These are all fixed macrophages, right? Both of these together, so the fixed and the wandering macrophages together, are known as the reticuloendothelial system. Yeah. So now, how do these neutrophils, monocytes and macrophages work? They work by a very simple concept which is known as diapedesis and phagocytosis. So if this is a blood vessel through which it is flowing, and this is a surrounding tissue, let's say, if there is an antigen here, then the cell which is present here is going to move towards the antigen, squeeze out of the let's make the antigen smaller because our cells are smaller. So let's say this, squeeze out of the blood vessel, then this is known as diapedesis, and then it will move, form pseudopodia and engulf your antigen, correct? So phagocytosis basically means cell eating, right? So it forms pseudopodia, false feet-like structures, and it engulfs the antigen. Okay, diapedesis means to leak out or squeeze out of the endothelium, right? So most of these cells will work in this function. They will, what are they going to do? They are going to simply phagocytose the available antigen. Coming to NK cells, natural killer cells are a special kind of leukocytes which kill cells. So they have a natural function in your body which is known as apoptosis. Now what is apoptosis? As you know, cells are constantly going into M phase, interphase, right? So all cell has a particular lifespan or turnover number, right? So when cells are close to death, the programmed cell death that happens, so the set of steps that a cell follows before it dies is known as apoptosis, which leads to its death is known as apoptosis, which is done by natural killer cells in normal healthy individuals as well. So even when cells in our body normally are dying without any infection, just because they are old and new cells are going to replace them, that is when NK cells will perform apoptosis, right? Other than that, in the case of an infection, however, NK cells help in cytolysis. So what is cytolysis? It is the rupture of a cell. How? NK cells have a certain kind of protein in them which are known as perforins. What perforins do is that, if this is the antigen, perforins go and attach to the cell membrane of the bacteria like this and cause perforation, छेद हो जाता है प्लाज्मा मेम्ब्रेन पे, perforations हो जाते हैं जिसके वजह से the cytoplasm will leach out and the cell will obviously die. Correct? So that is how natural killer cells will take care of infectious cells. Cells which are beyond repair infected, those cells will also can be killed by our natural killer cells. There are a few more systems, however. One is the complement system. The complement system consists of about 20 different proteins formed by our liver, which help in complementing the antigen recognition. So I told you antigen, right? So what is antigen? Anything foreign. Now when we have antigen in our system, this method, which we will obviously discuss in detail, antibody mediated immune system of the acquired groups send out antibodies. It's like having a specific fighter against a specific terrorist, right? So if it's a terrorist with if it's a suicide bomber, a special kind of force will go in. If it is a shooter, a special kind of force will go in. So it's a specific kind of defense against a specific kind of pathogen. So for an antigen, specific antigen, you always have specific antibodies in the body. They fight each other and the antigen is usually killed. Correct? This is complemented. So this is helped and exaggerated by the complementary system, the complement system. Moving on to inflammation. Inflammation means bruising. So there are 4 symptoms by which we identify inflammation: redness, swelling, pain, and a lot of heat. Okay, so any part of your body that is red, it is swollen, it is hot, and it is giving you a pain or an itching sensation, that's an inflamed region. It can happen due to hypersensitivity, that is allergies. It can happen if there is bruising, injury. It can happen due to infections, multiple reasons, right? Externally, we usually see inflammations when something bites us. It gets red, swollen, hot, right? And itches or pains, that's inflammation. An ant bite or a bee sting. Internally as well, if you have bruising or infections, for example in the lung or in the gastritis, for example, all of these are inflammations. Now inflammations happen in your body due to abrasion, right, or due to presence of foreign pathogens. What happens in that case is that there is a specific kind of cell called the eosinophils and basophils, the mast cells. The mast cells will go, and because they are broken, because there's been damage to that part, so these mast cells will break and they form something which is known as heparin. It's an anticoagulant. It goes and it causes all of the symptoms that we see. What it basically does is that it increases blood flow to the point, and therefore more of your protective cells can go and kill the pathogen, if any. So in the case of fever, what happens is that your body secretes an endogenous pyrogen which increases the temperature of the body, and therefore whatever has happened, whatever is the pathogen, that pathogen, because usually these pathogens are temperature sensitive, they end up dying, right? So that's what a fever does to you. Now that was all of your cellular barriers. Coming down to cytokine barriers. Now cytokines are basically chemical messengers that work between the innate and the acquired immune system, right? So whenever your system has been exposed to something any antigen. Your cytokines are usually, for example, interferons are secreted when there is a viral infection. There are interleukins, there are lymphokines. All of them help in the mediation between the acquired system and the natural defense system, so that the whole system can work together to protect you better against the diseases, right? Acquired immune system include AMIS, which is antibody mediated immune system, and CMIS, which is cell mediated immune system, which we will obviously discuss in detail in the later videos. Thank you. I hope this much was clear.